need an intro to the Deep Decisions project, but I don't know where to start. I guess that's the irony. I'm pretty hopeless at making decisions, and perhaps that's the reason that this topic interests me so much. But then again, perhaps it's because we all make 20,000 decisions every day. That would be about one every 3 seconds. So maybe it's quite important to understand. How would you define it? Is deciding which word to say next a decision? Or what about blinking? Is that an unconscious decision? Maybe a decision has to reach a certain threshold of importance to qualify. Are some decisions more important than others? If a parliament decides to change its relationship to other nations, then its single decision may affect billions of others. Maybe it's got more to do with choice. If I have 10 options, is that more of a decision than if I have just 2? And who picked that selection of options anyway? So you see, even the definition of the word decision is tricky and can take us down some philosophical avenues that crisscross and intertwine into a complex tangle of ideas. And I guess that's the fascinating thing about decisions. You can go from a philosophical discussion about the nature of choice and free will through to speculation about whether a friend has bought the right shirt. In fact, every discipline you can think of has its own way of treating the decision-making process. A mathematician may treat a decision as a problem in optimization, an economist as a way of deciding what's rational, a psychologist will tell you all about decision-making bias, a lawyer may talk about how to evaluate evidence or make decisions about guilt based on legal principles or precedent. An artist will tell you about aesthetics. A sociologist will talk about groupthink and cultural influences. A historian may speculate about counterfactuals. What might have happened if? A medic will talk about diagnosis and treatment decisions. A politician might talk about passing legislation or the voting system as a decision-making process for creating compromise solutions. And a linguist might touch on how the language we use affects the way in which we think about and frame the conceptual space in which decisions are made. So decision-making is truly pervasive. It cuts across everything. Different people may use different language when making different types of decision, but underneath, we're all doing much the same thing, making choices about what we believe and what to do given the situation or circumstances that we find ourselves in. Decision-making is one of those things, like breathing, that's so much part of everything we do that we only stop and reflect on it when it's not working.
With computers and artificial intelligence, decision-making is becoming increasingly systematized and delegated to machines. In one sense, this is great. It relieves people of the drudgery of making many small, although sometimes complex decisions, over and over again. But there are problems. Basing algorithms on particular decision-making preconceptions, say those of large international commercial interests, can affect billions of people without actually reflecting their diverse attitudes, beliefs and norms. Then ossifying those decisions in code that, for one reason or another, may be difficult to understand and change, can perpetuate decision-making mechanisms that we may want to revise to be fairer or better reflect social change.
A simple model of decision-making makes it look as though it's a reflective and rational process, but this is neither the case, nor necessarily should it be. Many decisions are made immediately, without conscious reflection, and many processes involve values and emotions. All that is for later exploration as the processes of decision-making are unpacked and as we distinguish between describing how decisions are made and prescribing how they should be made.
Interestingly, current approaches to artificial intelligence and machine learning, although using a quite general, domain-independent mechanism of decision-making, fall far short of the huge variety and diversity of techniques that people can recruit to making decisions. Current machine learning techniques cannot spot anomalies in their decisions, reflect on them from different points of view, perform ethical evaluations, or understand when they need more information and search it out. In looking at how people make decisions, perhaps, one day, we will be able to create artificial intelligence that helps humanity make more ethical, more informed and less biased decisions.
It seems that it's not just me that's hopeless about making decisions, it's everybody. We've discovered in recent years that what we all thought was solid and stable is in fact quite nebulous, ephemeral and manipulable. Once the gods had all the answers, then it was the priests, then it was the professionals, and now we kind of doubt them all. In a postmodern world, truth is relative. It's open to negotiation. My truth and your truth are just as good as each other. Even science is in question for its biases of selective publication and lack of ability to replicate findings that somehow became the received wisdom. Now, should you want, it seems that anything can be fake news.
But when nothing is absolute, what do we hang on to make sense of the world?
I guess it's kind of interesting that we've come to the point where arguably the highest office in the world has been occupied by somebody who has seemed to have no respect for the traditional ways in which the rules of evidence are applied to establishing what is and what is not the case, and hence any decision has become causally detached from the evidence. In fact, it's worse. The decision comes first and the evidence follows. The decision now causes the evidence. We've arrived at the extreme point in confirmation bias where, if certain people have their way, the decision is the fixed point and the evidence is the variable that must fall into place around it.
So, what better time is there to try and sort this mess out?
Not just to re-establish a position where the evidence should cause the decision, but to actually use our current understanding about good and bad decision making to address the important problems in the world. In making truth relative, we've made it the ally of the powerful. As many people have pointed out, in the postmodern world, we have arrived at a point where truth is defined not by the rules of evidence, but by the power to disseminate messages.
When truth is defined by who says it and is not independently checked by evidence, we're in real trouble.
But there's some key principles we can hang on to. Some rules of evidence, some rules of inference that can guide us to good decision making, where truth may be relative but not arbitrary. We need to dissociate claims about what is and what is not the case from who makes them, whether we're talking about world leaders or groups with particular identities. Good decisions are made on the basis of good evidence and reasoning, and not on the basis of who makes them. We can't unquestionably offload our responsibilities for good decision making onto others, even those we closely identify with. Good decisions are made by checking the anomalies in the evidence. They're made by understanding how problems are presented and framed can affect how we think about them.
The evidence suggests that the world is gradually becoming a better place.
There's less disease and death, fewer wars, less poverty, and generally less misery. You wouldn't think so looking at the news, but news is almost by definition bad news. It's heavily biased to alerting our fragile existence to the possibility of threat. But just because the news is biased doesn't mean that everything in the garden is rosy. Far from it. There are still many problems to be solved and many decisions to be made on the way to solving them, and many real threats. So, the Deep Decisions Project is here to make its tiny contribution to helping us do better. It's not going to solve the problems that remain. In fact, I have the sneaky suspicion that many of the problems will not be solved until we overcome the individual need for power and control at the expense of the common good. That's going to require systems that don't promote those to the top that most want, or should I say need, to get there, rather than those with a combination of both ethical and decision-making intelligence. But hopefully on the way to that, the Deep Decisions Project can help provide a stable and more reliable basis for making better decisions, where decisions can stand up for themselves and not who makes them. If the project can help just a few more people identify what kind of thinking, knowledge management, principles, methods and tools we can use to address the problems of an increasingly power-concentrated, complex and interconnected world, then it will have achieved its aims.
The Deep Decisions Project welcomes open-minded, diverse thinkers who are interested in improving decision-making. If you would like to become part of the project, learning with it, developing your own decision-making skills and tools, or if you are working on problems that need clear, critical thinking, then visit AIethics.ai/decisions.